Mark, you were recently in Brussels for a NATO summit where you expressed serious concerns about the decline in national flagged merchant vessels and seafarer numbers across NATO countries. Could you expand on the specific risks this trend poses to NATO security and resilience, particularly in the face of recent global conflicts?
Yeah, good morning, Helen. Thanks for that question. If I may, just to sort of put some context into the whole NATO conversation. Avid watchers of Nautilus TV will know that I think it was back in July. You and I did an extensive piece on an initiative that we took as Nautilus, not as the Nautilus Federation, together with our partners in the Nautilus Federation, on the occasion of the leaders of NATO countries meeting in Washington, D.C. to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the formation of the NATO alliance. And when that was going on, I was also in Washington, I was in Baltimore for a congress of the International Organization of Masters, Mates and Pilots. My good friend, Captain Don Marcus, I was together with him and his team, and we were talking about that event. It was either on or it was about to happen. And I said to Don that I'd been reading the NATO agreement that the Allies had signed all those years ago. And what struck me, it's kind of blatantly obvious, really, but it struck me just in that moment how obvious it was that those military objectives, that the mission of peace to protect each other, Article 5, an injury against one is an injury against all. Incidentally, we say that very much in the trade union movement as well, about solidarity, but they can't deliver their mission. They couldn't deliver it during the they couldn't deliver it during the Falkland Islands without chartering in foreign ships with foreign seafarers, which caused problems, well-documented problems. They couldn't do it during the Gulf War when they paid hugely inflated market rates to charter in foreign ships. And this was all codified in a report that our predecessor, Union Newmass, wrote in 2002. Of course, I was part of that at the time, but part of the team that produced that report. And we warned the then Labour government, and this was at the time, of course, when tonnage tax was just coming in, and we were warning that the ability for the merchant navy, a crucial element of the support for military forward operations, was going to be really, really challenging, and was challenging in 82, was even more challenging in the 90s during the Gulf War. And so we were writing about that and warning the government that they needed to think about the maritime security and resilience of the nation in that context, because naval and maritime go together. Incidentally, backdrop to this, China knows this very, very well. And there are many far more well-qualified commentators of the maritime situation who would tell you that China fully understands exactly what Britain and the USA understood all those years ago, tens and tens, when the UK was the number one military naval power. They understood that the RN and the MN go together, and the USA knew that after the First World War, became the leading nation and most powerful nation. And now China understood that playbook and is playing all its cards, building up its military capacity, building up its naval and maritime capability. And so the question is, how do we deliver NATO's commitment to its members when we have allowed our merchant fleets to just fade away, and at the same time allow the growth and the now dominance of flag of convenience shipping, over which we have no control, even though many of it, the tonnage that we're talking about, will be owned in countries like the UK and the United States and other NATO countries. And even if you could get hold of those ships and bring them into stuffed, they call it, ships taken up from trade, stuffed, even if you could get them to agree to you could take over them and use them in the military context, in the supply context, in a resilience context, Where would you get the seafarers, the UK seafarers, the US seafarers, the NATO seafarers to crew those ships and be willing to go with those ships into potentially difficult, dangerous military contexts and arenas? So that's the basis on which we wrote a statement on the occasion of the leaders' meeting in Washington, and we put that out. Now, we often think, does anybody read our statements? Any people in power? Well, fortunately, I think we know they do. Do they respond sometimes? And on this occasion, they read it and they responded. And it was Don who got some contact from US colleagues and said, we'd like to talk to you and Mark. Would you be prepared to come to Brussels? And we said, absolutely, we'd be prepared to come to Brussels. There's a transport group meeting in November the 5th. Would you come over? So we went over to give that message, to give, in person, face to face with the transport group. It was a combined session of ocean transport, inland transport, so not just inland shipping, but also road and rail and civil aviation groups. And Donna and I, was part of a wider agenda looking at risks, and we gave a presentation about particularly focusing on the people, because that's of course our business, the people in the industry. And Don and I spoke very, very candidly and very, very openly about the state of giving real live examples, UK and USA merchant marines. And they've been declining, as we are very familiar in Nautilus. We were very, very open about that. I'm a big fan, big supporter of the state aid that is provided to shipping in order to underpin national flag vessels and national seafarers. But I also have to be clear that it hasn't been enough. So in the time in the UK since tonnage tax been introduced, from 2000 when it was introduced by the Labour government to today, the flag grew initially and now we're falling away. There needs to be some attention paid to that. Why is the UK flag not retaining, or why isn't it attractive when people sign up for the tonnage tax, companies sign up for the tonnage tax? Why don't they also sign up for the flag? And importantly, the seafarers. Now, I think, if being brutally honest about this, the decline of UK seafarers was on a very, very steep line prior to tonnage tax. What tonnage tax did is it delayed that, and now the decline has been like that over the past 24 years, but it's still a decline. Year on year, we are still losing people. The age profile of UK officers and UK seafarers ratings is worse than the officers, because of the lack of investment in UK ratings has been steeper, more severe than in the officers. Is the core problem. So what are we going to do about that? Now, we know we have been working across government for the best part of 24, 25 years, trying to advance solutions that we believe will help. But we called on NATO to get the NATO member states to be thinking about this issue and say, how can we can't let this happen. How do we transport? How do we fulfill our mission? How do we transport the necessary hardware and people in support of the defense of NATO members without that mercantile marine merchant navy component? The answer is they know they can't. And so we think we have a compelling case. We made a strong, compelling case. We appeal for them to keep dialogue open with us, make it ongoing. And Don and I pledged to do more work on this and to come back to them with more considered research to demonstrate the severity of the situation which we set out. It's clear in my mind that they need to do something. Obviously, we've now got a new government, we've got a new incoming president who has some very
of the United States,
been very vocal. Yes, United States. Sorry, thanks, Helen. And they had some very forthright views about NATO and NATO members and their spending on military spending investment, 3% of GDP, and I think the necessary investment in mercantile marines is by relatively speaking small change against the military budgets of the certainly of the major NATO members. I think we have to be part of that conversation. There has to be major investment in mercantile, marine, merchant navy, in ships, but fundamentally in people as well. And we need to, we spend a lot of our time, representing to government. We need smart funding to be 100%.
Yeah,
right?
that's here in the UK.
Here in the UK, smart funding 100%. We know that in the Netherlands it's 100%. We know that many European neighboring countries and Singapore and the Chinese investing huge amounts of money in their people. And we have to be in that space. This is what we have to do, and it's really tough because when government budgets at the moment, there's a spending review in the UK imminent, and it's a hard sell. But I think it's absolute must. We also need ship owners to step forward and say, "Hey, we're going to commit. We're going to take these people on. That's great. 100% really does change the dynamic for us." Because now you're not one of the most expensive places to train a UK seafarer, an officer, and frankly ratings too. You're now competitive, and we like the quality of the people that come out. It becomes, I'll tell you now, it's one less excuse for the ship owners, right? Because this is what I hear: oh, it's too expensive to do. You can't train UK cadets, they're too expensive. I can go elsewhere and get them. And then, of course, we need to look at incentives and support and boosting support to make sure that they remain competitive going forward once they've qualified. But ship owners need to be clear about what they want. And do they support the UK flag or not? Do they support UK shipping? Do they want to be here? Do they want to train and employ our people? And if there's things we can do to help them answer that question with a positive yes, then frankly, they need to talk to us, because it's an open door for us. We want to work in partnership with companies like that. But for companies who are simply here because they think the tonnage tax quite sweet and they're not really interested in training cadets, I'll pay the pilot payments and or we'll train the cadets, but we're not interested in them once they're done. They're not really the type of company that I want to be working with, and maybe they should be finding somewhere else to do their business. And that's my message to government. We need to find employers that are on board with Maritime 2050. Let's relaunch Maritime 2050. Let's deliver the people chapter. I mean, it's wider than the ships and the seafarers, of course, because we've got the whole maritime economy, huge contribution to UK GDP, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of jobs, apprenticeships, cadetships. This is what we need to build and preserve and invest and grow. And I like what I'm hearing from the government in that respect. But now's the time for action. I'm glad the Chancellor wants to invest in the nation. I'm hoping we can have some of that investment for maritime. But let's not forget, coming back again to your original question, this is also about our maritime resilience and our maritime security. And this isn't the time for penny pinching. Now's the time for bold decisions. And those decisions need to be taken not just by the UK, but the whole of NATO. And that was our goal in pitching strongly to the NATO transport group. So yeah, much more work to be done. I hope you'll come and talk to me again about this specific issue. I know you'll talk to me again, but about this specific issue in future editions, so we can see how that's going.
No, absolutely. I know this is an ongoing conversation, and we will absolutely talk about it again, and specifically about those specific asks of NATO and NATO countries to invest in their merchant marines around training and in their careers, and that will support our military resilience, won't it, of NATO member countries. So thank you very much, Mark. I appreciate that, and speak to you soon.
Thank you, Helen.